or Muscat. I can't recall. I can make
So he was very rough in his way of teaching.
Yeah, but he had his own private tutoring. You see, so you go pay the money privately, and he taught you more. But lucky, very lucky, all my life in the in the dockyard, only one I could remember that he actually made the 4 years to go to England to become an architect. And I was working with him. He was from Virgo. His name was Sadni, Lorif Sadni.
Okay.
FSANDI, Sadni, yes. He was very, very smart, became a designer. Anyway, that's the only one I remember. The rest is all English. Taylor and Mitchell and the...
This might sound like a bit of a strange question, but at the time, were there any women working in the dockyards in any job?
No. What happened is this. I was going to come with that too. Because the dockyard employed 25,000 people plus, okay? But during the war, because it got complicated, you see, then there was the need of the DDB, which is Dockyard Defense Batteries. These were volunteer workers that they manned the anti-aircraft guns to protect the naval yard and the dockyard from the attacks. So they were now moved away from their jobs to go attend the fortresses. So they needed a lot of women. That's the first time in Malta I ever saw a woman go to work. And they did a good job because they lasted a long time. They become, I think, about 27,000. But they were in every department.
Oh, that's very interesting. So what sort of work were the women doing at the time?
Well, whatever they were qualified for, mostly skilled laborers, like welders, plumbers, soldering and tinsmiths, and maybe woodwork. But the big jobs were handled always by men. Okay? But then you get again the population of the naval personnel that they go with the ships for repairs, and there's maybe 2,000 people in there extra, and you have to complement with them. Especially at one time, there were two American heavy cruisers, and they struck a mine. One was the Savannah, and the other one was the Philadelphia. They had lost, one had 30 people dead in it because they struck a mine, and the Philadelphia, I think, had about 75. So then they had to be buried in Malta, and until they had to be repaired in Malta. And when the ship was gone, they rebuilt it in. Maltese were one of the best naval yards in the world. We had the commodities, we had the dry docks, we had the floating docks, we had cranes, very well equipped, the English way. When the war settled down, because before the war, when the war broke in, they cleared every part of the naval yard there to England because they thought we were Italians. They thought we were going to rebel against them. But when they saw it's the other way around, then they started bringing back the equipment. We started the war with three 3-inch guns and 3 gladiators and a stripped naval yard. Okay, I think you better ask the questions because it's better like that. Because I talked to
Okay, sure. On the day, probably I will start with some information also about your life because you'll be speaking to people who will be seeing you for the first time. So it's also interesting to know where you're from, how old you are now, when you moved to the United States.
That's all done. I remember all that.
how many brothers and sisters you have. I know you mentioned some of them also worked at the dockyard, right?
Yes, my brother Paul, my brother Joe. They're both shipwrights.
And were they older than you or younger?
No, one of them, Joe, was older than me, and he gave me more tuition than any teacher that had given me in there, in the naval yard, through him. My brother Paul did not qualify as an apprentice. So he was qualified to go in there, but not going to school like I attended school. Just go to work and train like that. They were both shipwrights and both worked in the boat yard.
And I know the dockyards, as you were saying, were like a school essentially. Also, I mean, they had a huge
It's better
educational
than,
aspect.
let me assure you, it's better than any school that I ever heard of, because this is like Zabbar, we have University Street. I call it University Street, Bayada Street, because everything was in there. We grew, we as children, our training was in the workshops. You know, cabinet makers, wagon makers, blacksmiths, tinsmiths, tile makers, cement work. We used to go and help them out, and they used to let us work, and we learned a lot from there.
Okay.
The dockyard had everything under the creation of God, from aircraft carriers to little tubs.
So the Naval Yard also had workshops in places like Zabbar.
No.
Oh, they in the dockyard from Zabbar they picked up one thing. Let me tell you something. I don't know if you know this. Have you ever heard of Dungulirim Solar?
No.
Bayada. Let me tell you. Take the Church Street. Behind the Church Street now it's called, I don't know. They changed the name.
Okay.
You go straight to Bayada Street. You go straight and you cross Bayada Street. Right at the corner, there's a little villa, it's like a little palace, with a statue on the very top. Dungulim Solar. And that guy, the priest himself, was an engineer, and he used to produce ball bearings.
Okay.
Bayada Street, and had his engineering in Redeemer Street. His brother, Sir Jose, he actually was taken body and soul with his equipment, because he invented how to make acetylene gas to cut the iron. He invented how to make the coal and to light up the acetylene torches with the gas, oxygen and gas, and they were hot enough to cut through the steel. And then the English, they knew about him. They took him and his shop, which was on Bayada Street, to the Navy yard itself, to the dockyard itself, the beginning of the dockyard. And he lasted then, as far as I know, he was still there. And his house was next to the church, where Inspector Samini used to live in there. That was his house, beautiful house. Okay. Now, his other brother, I told you about him. He was crippled. He was a big, huge man, and he made his own car in Bayada Street. He also had a big statue of the Virgin Mary on top of the building. He actually made an elevator. So he put the car in the elevator, in the garage, and he raises up to the next floor. Okay? This is Bayada Street that I'm talking about.
And this is in the 40s, we were talking?
This is I grew up in the 30s.
In the 30s.
I was up there until I was 13 years old. So I enjoyed everything. From there, we moved to Birkirkara as a refugee, because the war broke in.
Because of the war.
Yeah, anyway, but...
okay.
Yeah, and the same, anything you want to know about anything, you just
when we hear about the dockyard, we hear a lot about stories of danger. You've told us about the war, and other conversations we've talked about accidents. So it's danger from all sides.
Well, it was very, very, very very well organized, the British way. I mean, one thing you gotta tell about the British, they are organized people, okay? Now, we also had, besides all, we had medication. In the middle of the yard, there's medication. When you don't feel good, you go to the medical, and they send you home, and they give you some cure, right? That's one. Then, let's go section by section, because this is how you define the docket. Otherwise, there's no way of telling you what's in there. Then you had big hospital. Big hospital is in Calcutta. And there was the naval hospital. And if you recall, if you ever been down there, there's an elevator from the jetty all the way to those were for the visitors and for the stretchers to go up. And then you cross over that bridge to bigger hospital itself, which was beautiful. Beautiful hospital. Now, that's also next to the villa or a palace of the admiral that was in charge of the naval dockyard, right? That's one. That's what. Now you also had a hospital in Biggie, in the naval yard itself, naval yard in the dockyard. I kept saying naval like here. That was situated on Corradino, which we call Cordi, but English called Corradino. Up the Corradino, which was up the bastion, up the, like the big bastions around the naval yard, like St. John Taucha, St. John, St. Angelo. That's where the defense of the naval yard was. Defense all borderline Cospiqua and up there on Corradino, you had sport complexes, which are soccer games and anything. They had fields all over, which they still use them today. With the Iberians and Paula and St. George's of Bormla, they have the football field still there. But most of all, and I get in trouble, they had what you call the prison of the Navy and the Army. This was the most cruel thing you could ever lay your eyes on. Speaking of the Germans, nothing compared to this. Give you an example. You gotta shave if you're confined to there. You gotta shave with a straight edge laser while hopping. You'd be hopping and you gotta shave. This way, if you cut yourself, hey, your cell was 4 by 6. Okay? And you had a mattress in there, and you had everything there. But before you go to bed, you gotta open the cell, take the mattress out, take a bucket of water, put it on the floor, and they lock you in. So this is the idea that they had this cruelty. This way, this guy won't do it again. Stay away from it. He will not do it again. And believe me, no matter what rank he was, no matter what, you're all the same. They had sergeants in there, quartermasters, and they take them outside in the yard, and they say, left, right, left, right. And you march and parade and go this way, in the sun, And that was cruel, very cruel. So, sometimes guys used to keep walking and then boom, until they drop. Okay, that's to give you an idea.
So in the case of the prison, who would have been the prisoners?
Sailors, mostly sailors, and the army.
Okay.
Whoever do something wrong, whatever it is, the confinement there is there for a treat. And I got caught because we were working there doing some repairs, in the structure. And I used to see them working, the prisoners. And I felt sorry, at the lunch. We used to carry the lunch with us. And I sneaked a piece of bread from my lunch to one prisoner. I put it on the, and the guy saw me. The quartermaster saw me. And he came and said, get out of there. Out. He threw me out, and I could not go up there anymore. Because I shouldn't do that. I should not break the law. Law is law. And believe me, those guys, whoever was in there, they would not be turning back because it was me. Okay, that's really, then up there too, they had beautiful gardens, everything well kept and everything. Then under Corradino, which is a huge complex of bastions, they used to dig under street level with downstairs, and the bastion will be at the street of digging there, and they had open, they put generating station, big, huge generators for electricity. Underground. Nobody could touch them because they were freaking 50, 60 feet underground. The thickness of the bastion. My uncle was in America, and he was one of the managers of the generation for the electricity. They need to produce a lot of electricity. Besides that, there was also a storage place next to them, underground, of gasoline. And they used to store gasoline there to be protected from bombings. You see, people in there was going nuts. by taking the gasoline there, stored the gasoline out, the fumes from the gasoline dropped their brains. They went crazy. They didn't know what they were going this way, that way. Okay, they cured it and they stopped it.
Who was this? The workers or people living in the area?
No, the guys working delivering the gas, the gasoline, the gasoline tanks. They had gasoline, cans. Okay, that was another segment. Now, the docket is also spread around. Okay, the docket itself, which is called Spiqua, Vittoriosa, Virgo, Lisla, and تحت الأرلوش تاع Lisla, and the cloud there. Wait till you hear this. Very few people know, except people like us. Okay, because Piquet was Sanjaya and part of Casal Paula, the bottom lay part of it, and then you go to Torpedo Depot, it was in Xira, and you got the you got Riga Hospital, that's all part of the dockyard. You got Renella with the telegraphic post where built and telegraph. L'Arbre Tarnella, they call, are they still there? L'Arbre Tarnella?
I'm not sure. I don't think they are telegraph poles in Renella.
Yeah. Well, those are the L'Arbre Tarnella, very high.
Okay.
My father-in-law used to zip through them to pay them,
Okay.
Yeah, there are quite a few of the guys because the posts, they call them strops. They used to sit down there and they paint them because they come down from top to bottom to take care of them, upkeep. And that's where big Ricasoli, Port Ricasoli, breakwater. Okay. And I love that place. I used to work there too. That's the last place I worked, as a matter of fact. And it was the army, but under the Navy supervision. And then they had bigger hospital, which I told you, while the army had Imtarfa Hospital up by Rabat. That was beautiful hospital too.
Yes.
Not civilians, only the army. Okay, then let me see what is there. Oh, Manuel Island.
Okay.
Manuel submarine base.
Well,
They had Marsa, part of Marsa. This is all naval. They had Lascaris with the war offices. I think it's a museum.
Yes, in fact, there's a museum there, the Lascaris Forum.
That's how it used to be the personnel working in there. That's why they have the statues on there. You see? That's how they operated. The equipment is still there. That's the same equipment they had in those days. But we were not allowed in there. You know? What else? As far as departments go, very serious business. There's no such thing as amateur, no such thing. If you can do it, you gotta do it, or else get the hell out of here. Now, the most amazing thing, I was explaining to her, I'm at the sketch in here. One of them was the factory. The factory was between a big building, a city block here in America, between number 5 dock and number 4 dock, okay? The dry docks. This was like just in the middle here. And just make sure this is the building, right? Flat birds. From one side of the building to the other, there's a big shaft, okay? There's a big shaft. And this was hooked up to generators that they make the revolution. So this shaft was constantly in motion. Each machine, which there's hundreds of them, and they're lathes, shapers, what do you call it? Drill presses, milling machines, everything need to be turned. And they were hooked up from there with another belt of their own to this main belt on top. You see? The generator at this end here, this is the shaft over here, the belts hooked up with each machine. You see the men working in there? And they have a clutch in there that they can connect and disconnect while this is still working. So when they make attachment, they start working themselves. And besides that, on the very top there, what you call travelers. because the equipment was so heavy, and whatever they made parts for the ships, part. The traveling crane, which was from one side of the building to the other, moves this way and that way with pulleys up and down, carry the equipment, that's called the travelers. So this is very,
So what was that used for?
that was used for the parts for the ships.
Okay.
But Francis, I'm on the phone. I'm talking to the. Oh, you